Today we untangle the sad and complex story of young man Jacob Rasmussen, whose life was cut short in August 2016 in the lavish city of Naples, Florida. Living in Naples, Florida, 20-year-old massage therapist Jacob Rasmussen. Originally from a Minnesota tiny town, Jacob had relocated to Naples in search of improved prospects and a milder temperature. Particularly among his older clients, he was well known for his attractive appearance, athletic build, and friendly demeanor. This helped him to become quickly popular. Jacob developed a devoted customer base by naturally making individuals feel unique. Jacob's appeal and good looks also drew him into the world of sugar babies, where younger people engage in sexual relationships with older, wealthier people in return for gifts and money. Although Jacob had other sugar mums, his main one was 59-year-old astrologist Veronica Hayes. Jacob benefited from these ties, but they also invariably generated conflicts and complications. Jacob was looking forward his future in the days before his death. One of his customers had lately given him a kind gift, an Audi SUV which he flaunted to his buddies. For months he had been looking forward a trip to Disney World with some of his pals. From images of his new automobile to countdowns to his Disney vacation, Jacob's Instagram was bursting with postings on his preparations. Jacob stayed vibrant and hopeful in spite of these complexity. His contagious smile and upbeat demeanor were well known. Both clients and friends praised his drive and aspiration. Though in a sad and startling manner, Jacob's life, full of aspirations and plans, would be cut short. Like every single morning on August 12, 2016, Linda Martino, Jacob Rasmussen's neighbor, began her day. Living near Jacob in their Naples, Florida apartment block, Linda was a 95-year-old retired schoolteacher from Brooklyn. She regularly spoke with Jacob and grew worried when she saw his gleaming new Audi SUV had not moved in 2 weeks. Given Jacob's typically hectic schedule, Linda felt it strange. Linda made the decision to check on Jacob about 9 a.m. She knocked on his door, but there was no reply. Concerned, she made use of the spare key Jacob had handed her in case of need. She sensed something was unusual as soon as she opened the door. The flat was too quiet, and the air smelt faintly of something nasty. When Linda called out Jacob's name, no answer came back. She moved across the living room and into the hall. She came into a terrible sight in the restroom. Naked and laying face down in the toilet was Jacob. His body went limp and his head sank under the water. Linda gasped and turned away, her heart hammering. Shaking, Linda contacted 911 and fled her apartment. She spoke softly as she described what she had discovered. She told the operator, "I think my neighbor is dead. He looks as though something happened in his restroom." Staying on the line with Linda, the 911 operator tried to remain calm until the police showed up. Paced back and forth in her apartment, Linda was in shock and peered anxiously at Jacob's door. What she had seen defied belief. Jacob had been vibrant just a few days earlier, flitting about his plans to see Disney World and flaunting his new automobile. Within minutes, the Naples Police Department showed up at the site. After securing the area, cops started looking. Linda was told to wait outdoors while the cops worked. Trying to digest the sad occurrence, she sat on a bench shaking and held her head in her hands. Soon after Jacob passed away, word of it got around the flat building. Outside, neighbors gathered murmuring and speculating about what had transpired. The local news soon caught the tale as reporters arrived to cover the startling find. The scenario was recorded by cameras displaying the police presence and the worried expressions of the neighbors. Everyone was in shock, but especially those who knew Jacob well. His unexpected and forceful death young, full of possibility, he had a great future. Now his life was sadly cut short, and his friends and family had to grieve the loss. Arriving fast at the site following Linda Martino's 911 call on August 12, 2016, was the Naples Police Department. Leading the probe was Detective Samuel Jenkins. Having solved numerous well-publicized cases, he was renowned for his meticulousness. Officer Karen Blake, his partner, was renowned for her calm head and keen sense of intuition. The cops noted the strange quiet as soon as they walked into Jacob Rasmussen's flat. There was no evidence of fight in the neat living room. A flat-screen TV was on the wall, and on the coffee table were some magazines, including the most recent GQ edition. The flat appeared normal, but the stench suggested something more terrible. Moving carefully towards the toilet, where Jacob's body was discovered, Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake. The bathroom was modest with new shower and white tiles. Head buried in the water, Jacob's bare body slung over the toilet. Although the scene was unsettling, there were no obvious indicators of a break-in and nothing caught out as odd. Jacob had been drowned. His head had been shoved into the toilet, and his arms and neck showed marks from a struggle. Based on the body's posture and the bruise pattern, Detective Jenkins concluded Jacob had battled back against his assailant. There was no blood or other clear evidence in the bathroom itself. The cops started their meticulous probe. They searched for any possible hints after gathering fingerprints and snapped pictures of the whole flat. They came into a collection of kitchen knives, but none seemed to be missing. On the kitchen counter, Officer Blake discovered Jacob's phone. It was a new model, an iPhone 6S, and it might include important data. She bagged it meticulously for more study. To learn more about Jacob's recent behavior and any possible guests, Detective Jenkins and his crew spoke with neighbors including Linda Martino. Linda said she observed some of Jacob's clients leaving, but nothing appeared odd. She also mentioned the just-acquired new Audi SUV Jacob had got. Arriving to start their investigation of the deceased and the flat was the forensic team. They looked for signs of blood using luminol even in apparently clean surfaces. They also searched for hair, fibers, and other minute bits of evidence the assailant might have left behind. The police started to put together a chronology of Jacob's last hours as the inquiry developed. They hoped that further hints might come via his phone and the apartment complex's security cameras. The apartment's cleanliness and the absence of clear evidence pointed to extraordinary care the killer had taken to hide his tracks. The sad events in Jacob's flat signaled the start of a convoluted inquiry. Officer Blake and Detective Jenkins understood their case would be challenging. They were resolved to identify the person behind the young man's premature death and bring them before justice. The first person under inquiry was 59-year-old astrologist Veronica Hayes. Known in Naples for her vibrant attitude and outstanding clientele, which included some celebrities, she resided in a magnificent house embellished with zodiac signs and exquisite gems. Veronica was known for her giving. She would frequently present pricey objects to her clients and acquaintances. She was recognized, yet also as obsessive and possessive, particularly in her personal relationships. Veronica had been in a sexual connection with Jacob Rasmussen, serving as his sugar mommy, not quite hidden. She lavished him with gifts, including the flat-screen TV in his house measuring 70 inches. Veronica was quiet but obviously offended when the cops first questioned her. She said she felt rather wounded to learn Jacob had been meeting other women. She denied any part in his death despite her emotions. Officer Karen Blake and Detective Samuel Jenkins ran the questioning. Inquiring Veronica about her location on the evening of the murder, they were meticulous and careful. Like a normal Virgo, Veronica said she was at home, alone, meditating and reading the most recent issue of Astrology Today. She respected Jacob's demand for seclusion as a Scorpio and stated she hadn't seen him for several days before his death. The cops pored over Veronica's past. She freely stated she couldn't help it to someone with her moon and disease. She had a history of strong relationships, including 3 unsuccessful marriages, that often ended poorly. Former clients and acquaintances said she was charming but domineered. Several said Veronica's Cancer moon may make her quite envious, particularly if she felt misled. This allowed the cops to have a plausible reason for her hurting Jacob. Veronica changed her attitude during the questioning. Particularly when asked about her relationship with Jacob, she was increasingly irritated and combative. Her affluence, well-publicized lifestyle, and astrological belief led her to accuse the authorities of unfairly singled her out. The cops pressed her for specifics even though she objected. The cops looked into Veronica's phone records as well. In the days before Jacob died, they discovered several calls and text messages to him. While some of the notes were loving, others were progressively nasty, violent, desperate, accusing. Veronica was trying to keep control as this data presented a picture of a relationship breaking apart. Veronica's behavior grew more erratic and the evidence grew piling, but direct proof linking her to the crime scene was absent. To support an arrest, the police required more hard proof. Veronica stayed a major suspect as the inquiry went on. Her behavior and past kept close examination under great scrutiny. Bryony Mitchell-Keynes, a 68-year-old Australian millionaire with rather an interesting background, was the second suspect the police looked at. After legal issues in Australia, Bryony had lately relocated to Naples following claims in a newspaper depicting her allegedly trafficking asylum seekers to work for the chain of her restaurant for, quote, subhuman rates. Bryony, who was known for her gregarious and exuberant nature, was also quite protective of her friends and had an unexpectedly volatile temper. Not long before his death, Bryony had a sexual relationship with Jacob Rasmussen. She was providing him pricey presents, including the Audi SUV he got just before he passed away, as another of his sugar mothers. Bryony answered police inquiries cautiously yet cooperatively. She said she was shocked at Jacob's death and admitted her relationship with him. Leading the questioning were Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake. They questioned Bryony about her behavior that evening Jacob was slain. Bryony said she had been enjoying the evening at Naked Masquerade Ball at the Naples Grand Beach Resort, mixing with other rich guests. She gave the names of numerous local business owners and socialites who would support her alibi. Bryony stayed calm under inquiry, but her attitude changed when asked about Jacob's prior connections. She insisted she had no knowledge of his interaction with other ladies and sounded agitated and protective. Her response raised questions for the police since it suggested possible envy and a reason for injuring Jacob. Seeking any evidence connecting Bryony to the crime, Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake looked about her house. Indicating her great commitment to their relationship, they discovered several costly presents she had intended to give Jacob: a jet ski, an air hockey table, and a PlayStation 4. They also observed many sizable withdrawals from her bank account within the weeks before Jacob passed away. Although this by itself was not damning, it implied she was closely involved in Jacob's life and ready to shell out large sums of money on him. They also found a succession of text exchanges between Bryony and Jacob. The messages began playful but grew increasingly forceful as Bryony complained about Jacob's lack of dedication. Bryony cooperated and had a solid alibi, but the police continued to be dubious of her culpability. Her strong emotions for Jacob and possibly jealousy gave her a reason, but unlike with Veronica Hayes, there was no clear proof she connected to the murder. Bryony's activities and relationships to Jacob kept the authorities under careful observation while the inquiry went on. Marcus Dean, a 21-year-old rival with Jacob Rasmussen, was the third suspect under inquiry. Marcus was seen in Naples as aspirational and fiercely competitive. He was also a sugar baby, satisfying married couples weary with their boring sex life. Rich couples always trying to surpass his contemporaries in sexual performance and sugar parent count. Marcus was motivated to be the best in his circle. His demeanor was said to be hot-headed, and he had a history of fighting and arguing, often driven by drink. Marcus was questioned by authorities soon after Jacob's body was discovered. Leading the interview, Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake concentrated on the nature of Marcus and Jacob's connection. Marcus said he and Jacob had become rivals, fighting for the gifts and attention of the same rich women. Although he said their relationship was difficult, he argued it was only a result of the competitiveness. Marcus said he was celebrating a recent orgy request with other wealthy couples in a nearby pub, Patty Murphy's, on the evening of Jacob's murder. He gave the names of his acquaintances who might support his alibi. Marcus's propensity for starting arguments after drinking, however, begged questions about his likely role in Jacob's murder. Examining Marcus's past, the police discovered several accounts of conflicts involving previous sugar babies and clients, particularly when Marcus felt threatened or insulted. Many said he was violent and fast to get enraged. Along with his animosity with Jacob, this disposition provided the authorities with a possible murder motivation. Marcus first seemed cool under interrogation, but he grew defensive when pressed about his location and relationship with Jacob. Denying any role in Jacob's killing, he charged the police with trying to attribute the crime to him out of their conflict. As the interrogation went on, his anger mounted since it seemed he was hiding something. Officer Blake and Detective Jenkins looked for evidence in Marcus's flat. They discovered a few things connecting him to Jacob, including a gold chain Jacob had posted on social media claiming it was a client present. The cops also came onto a slew of text messages between Marcus and Jacob. The communications exposed growing tensions, Marcus accusing Jacob of client theft and threatening to teach a bleeping lesson. The police also looked into security footage from Patty Murphy's on Jacob's death's evening. The video verified Marcus's presence at the pub, but it revealed a 2-hour discrepancy whereby Marcus went missing. Given that he had adequate time to commit the crime and return to the bar, this window of time generated more questions. Marcus's suspicious behavior and the growing evidence notwithstanding each other lacked direct proof linking him to Jacob's murder. Marcus was under constant observation by the police, seeking to find more data that may either support or refute their accusations. 6 days following the body discovery of Jacob Rasmussen, on August 18, 2016, the Naples Police Department had a breakthrough. The day was hot and sunny, with temps reaching mid-90s. Officer Karen Blake and Detective Samuel Jenkins were in the police station when a local pawn shop owner called them after discovering something odd while looking over recently pawned goods. 2 days before Jacob's death, a gold bracelet bearing the letters JR had been pawned. He informed the police, saying it was a present from a client. Jacob had uploaded a picture of this exact bracelet on his social media page. The cops went right to the pawn shop on 5th Avenue South, a hive of stores and eateries. Records shown at the pawn shop indicated Marcus Dean had pawned the bracelet. Marcus once more became the focal point of the research based on this fresh data. Officer Blake and Detective Jenkins were resolved to go farther. Marcus returned under police custody for interrogation. This time they faced him with the bracelet's proof. Marcus changed his attitude from defensive to obviously anxious. He stammered over his words, trying to explain why he owned the bracelet. Marcus said that Jacob had presented it to him as a gift, but given their divisive past, the cops were dubious. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake also looked over pawn shop security footage. Marcus was seen on the video walking into the store pawning the bracelet. Marcus's activities were hardly questioned as the timing on the video matched the date seen on the transaction records. The cops challenged Marcus's account further using this video. Re-examining the security tape from Patty Murphy's on the evening of Jacob's death, the police also. Marcus had left the bar 2 hours earlier, giving him ample time to commit the murder. This fresh data helped to clarify Marcus's likely role in Jacob's murder. The cops felt they had enough to go with the bracelet, the menacing text messages, and Marcus's dubious alibi gap. When Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake showed their results to the district attorney, she agreed the evidence was convincing. Now the cops were concentrating on compiling more data to support their case against Marcus. Resolved to deliver justice for the young man whose life was tragically cut short, they kept interviewing witnesses and pieced together the events preceding Jacob's death. Hey true crime solvers! Please like and subscribe to our channel if you enjoy more real-life murder mysteries. And do you have any ideas on this case or have a case of your own you would like us to look at? Comment on this. Remain safe. Real crime. The exposed stories. The Naples Police Department broke through in Jacob Rasmussen's murder investigation on August 22, 2016. Officer Karen Blake and Detective Samuel Jenkins have collected sufficient proof to name Veronica Hayes the killer. 59-year-old astrologist Veronica was well known for her lavish way of living and strong attitude. She was publicly charming, but she also had a dark, compulsive side, particularly in relationships. According to the inquiry, Veronica's fixation with Jacob had become dangerously strong. When she found that Jacob was visiting other older women for sex and getting pricey presents from them, including the Audi SUV from Brian E. Mitchell Keynes, she became enraged. On August 1, 2016, Veronica's jealousy and wrath boiled over. Veronica approached Jacob at his flat on that evening over his new car. An quarrel broke out, and Veronica sank Jacob in his own bathroom out of a flash of wrath. She drove his head underwater until he stopped fighting, bruising his arms and neck. She peeled off his clothes to further humiliate him and create the impression that he drowned himself, therefore rendering the sight even more horrible. Using forensic evidence, security footage, and witness testimony, Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake put the events together. Phone records revealed Veronica was near Jacob's flat at the time of the murder, therefore her alibi, that she was home reading Astrology Today and meditating, fell apart. Moreover, forensic examination of Veronica's clothes turned up traces of Jacob's blood, therefore clearly tying her to the crime scene. The cops arrived in to arrest Veronica early on August 22nd. When they got to her house, it was a big estate with astrological symbols and gemstones. Veronica was caught aback. Her assured manner broke under handcuffs and direction to the police car. She objected loudly, charging the cops with discriminating against her because of her riches and reputation. The arrest rocked the Naples society. Jacob's family, grieved by his passing, experienced a range of emotions including relief and grief. Though heartbroken over their son's needless death, they were glad the killer had been apprehended. Shocked as well, Veronica's friends and customers battled to reconcile the kind woman they knew with the terrible murder she had committed. Second-degree murder charges Veronica Hayes. Her trial would expose more about her sinister side of her nature and the sad obsession that drove her to kill Jacob. Although the arrest was a vital step towards justice, the road was far from over. October 2016 saw Veronica Hayes start her murder of Jacob Rasmussen trial. Journalists, neighbors, and activists crowded the courtroom. The case attracted national notice, and many people were fascinated by Veronica's unusual astrological argument. Being a Virgo, a sign noted for being exacting and conscientious, she thought she was being discriminated against. Under the direction of District Attorney Martin Delgado, the prosecution contended that Veronica's fixation on Jacob had led her to murder. 45-year-old Delgado, known for his tough-on-crime attitude, showed Officer Blake and Detective Jenkins the gathered evidence. He presented the jury the phone records showing Veronica close to Jacob's flat, the forensic evidence linking her to the incident, and the bruises on Jacob's body pointing to a fight. Delgado portrayed a lady driven by envy and wrath who had painstakingly planned and carried out the murder. He called witnesses attesting to Veronica's possessive tendencies and growing resentment towards Jacob's prior relationships. Delgado made a quite clear case. The envy Veronica harbored had become lethal. Nancy Price, the defense lawyer, handled things differently. Price, a 50-year-old noted for her unusual strategies, concentrated on the so-called astrology defense. Veronica was being unfairly targeted, she said, based on her zodiac sign. Price brought in professionals who spoke on Virgo tendencies, stressing that Veronica's astrological qualities, rather than a criminal attitude, shaped her behavior. Veronica personally stood up and gently asserted that she suffered discrimination. She maintained the episode was a sad accident and she had no intention of harming Jacob. Groups like Virgos United and Americans Against Birth Sign Discrimination, who marched outside the courtroom all during the trial, helped to bolster her testimony. Demanding equitable treatment for all astrological signs and criticizing the injustice against Virgos, they carried signs the defense's case convinced the jury even if the prosecution had a strong one. November 15, 2016 saw Veronica convicted guilty of manslaughter rather than murder. Many who had expected a tougher penalty were surprised when the judge sentenced her to 10 years in jail. The decision broke Jacob's family. They believed that Veronica's wealth and clout had contributed to her smaller sentence and that justice had not been done. Friends and friends of Jacob were equally disgusted since they believed the trial had become a show instead of a search of justice. Viewing the result as a triumph against astrological prejudice, Veronica's followers rejoiced. The trial and its results spurred a lot of discussion on the function of unusual defenses in the legal system and the influence of public opinion on court rulings. The lives of all those engaged changed dramatically once Veronica Hayes' trial concluded. Veronica started her 10-year term at the Ocala Medium Security Florida Women's Reception Center. Her trial attracted a lot of media coverage, and she developed a reputation as controversialist. Using the library of the prison, she kept claiming she was a victim of discrimination because of her astrological sign and wrote letters and pieces about her ordeal. In astrological and legal spheres, her situation stayed a subject of debate. The result of the trial tested Jacob Rasmussen's Minnesota family's ability to adjust. Given a crime as heinous as Jacob's murder, they felt the 10-year sentence was too forgiving. The media often reported their responses, stressing their disappointment and loss. Through community gatherings and online memorials, they aimed to preserve Jacob's legacy and kept pushing for tougher sanctions for acts of this kind. Once a suspect in the case, Marcus Dean was under public close inspection. Although he was cleared of any role in Jacob's death, his history of altercations and rivalry with Jacob degraded his reputation. He battled to find employment and had to cope with media attention that portrayed him as a possible killer. Another suspect, Bryony Mitchell Keynes, returned to Australia and struggled personally. The bad press from the cases impacted her restaurant, and she faced with consumer and critic reaction. Bryony kept a quiet existence, hoping to separate herself from the case's debate. Everybody engaged in the murder of Jacob Rasmussen and the trial that followed suffered long-lasting consequences. It changed Naples, Florida's community, and raised awareness of problems of justice and inequality. The case turned into a warning story about the impact of personal prejudices and unusual defenses inside the court system. We appreciate you visiting us on this true crime episode featuring the unexposed stories. Keep tuned for more tales exploring the darkest sides of human nature.